Hello, this is Tom Cahill. It's in the early afternoon of the 11th of February 2025. There's been some interesting things recently that have cropped up which start bringing the constitution of various countries in line with what's going on and why they've happened. So in this particular installment of it, Donald Trump's recently said he's going to take Israel, or Gaza, sorry. Right, but the thing is that he's sort of saying like they're going to take it like it doesn't already belong to the crown. But Gaza isn't a country, Israel isn't a country, America isn't a country. Most countries aren't countries. So, for instance, I've never actually checked this one. Well, I think I did check it, but I don't really remember. It was ages ago. New Zealand, in the Australian Constitution, is part of Australia, right? And Australia isn't a country, New Zealand is not a country, because all of them have the banking from the Bank of England, and they have the bar, yeah? British Admiralty Regent, or something like that. But you see, with something like Gaza, it really doesn't matter what they do there, because they can lie about it. You can't get in and check it. Remember, the whole invasion of Israel is just completely ridiculous. Seems like it was done, or some people would tell you, I could tell you a lot of CGI was involved, obviously, but whether that aspect of it was fake or not doesn't really matter, because it's just absolutely impossible to do that. So it doesn't really, it's just irrelevant. And whether they're really blowing people up in buildings, frankly, sometimes, like charity begins in a home, there's no point worrying about that, because it's wrong if it's happening. But remember, the whole invasion was fake, and it can't have happened. And also, even if it did happen, who runs Hamas? Mossad set up Hamas and Hezbollah. This is admitted. And so when did they stop running them? They were set up by them, they invented them. Anyway, back to the Constitution. People worry about minutiae, and for a long time I've often worried why we don't declare war on certain countries. This is for a very long time, more than 20 years. And I used to think it was just sort of just being criminals and just doing what you wanted now, but this is actually very short-sighted. It's because if you declare war on a country that you already own, you're going to have to explain, well, you can't declare war on them, can you, because you already own them. So everything just gets much more complicated. But then when you see what it is, because remember, one big thing, there was a thing called the Borneo emergency years ago, and that was like, people said something to do with insurance. They don't want to declare war because it will void all the insurance contracts because of the war clauses, which does make sense. But at the same time, remember, the insurance industry is like the most reliable source of who's actually in charge of things is the insurance industry. And every big thing like Brexit, there's a very good argument that it only actually happened if it did happen. I'm not saying it happened. I don't even know what Brexit means. I know a lot of thick people think they know what it means, but frankly I don't know what it means. But it would have huge bearings over all of the insurance contracts, which undermine everything. And I'm not talking about getting a sore neck or pretending to if you have a car crash. That's what most people think of when they think about insurance. It's not ambulance chasing insurance. They underpin every single financial transaction. Any construction project is financed. Therefore, the insurance have to finance the financing of it. Every single thing, insurance is the most important thing. And the good thing about insurance is, which is very good for you and me and everyone else, once you understand that every activity of the human is undermined by insurance in any corporation, in any capacity at all times, you start realising the people who work for the insurance companies, I'm not talking about the people who sell you the policies, but the people who actually run the insurance, not the little guinea pigs who just go around doing what they're told. Those people are like always very highly intelligent, yeah? And they're 100% reliable. That doesn't mean they're going to lie to you, but you can be 100% sure they know what they're doing, yeah? So whenever they do something, it's not an accident. They haven't fucked anything up. People who work for insurance companies, who run their insurance companies, sorry, they don't fuck things up. they're like, if you think that you've got something right and then one of them says it's wrong, well, they could be lying to you. But if they're not lying to you to trick you, which they'll do in a very clever way, by the way, they're more reliable than yourself because they don't make mistakes, because these are the most intelligent people in the world and they're working with other very intelligent people. So if you've got a team of people who are like way more intelligent than your average person all working together, and no thick cunts are allowed to work there, you realise they don't make mistakes, you see. So, for instance, do you know when people like Brian Gerrish, one of the reasons I first started making YouTube videos is he was talking about the Constitution, and he would call it things like, he had that Roger Hayes, he would blame it on him. He would say it was for the British Constitution. There's no such thing as a British Constitution, right? But the thing is that the Constitution is actually extremely simple, and what it means, I forget how many years it is. It's like a judge has ruled on this, it's never ever been questioned, it's never been overruled. He said the Constitution is what reasonable men would do and have been doing and would think for the last, I think it's 600 years, right? So this brings up some really interesting questions domestically, and one of them will be, right, so I have to preface it. You've got the what do you call it? The plebiscite for the UK, Brexit, for instance. Now you know that Brexit doesn't have, what do they call them? Plebiscites. That's a vote, vote of the public. Don't have any force of law in this country, yeah? So they're completely deceptive. And I can go a bit further why they're wrong. Because you see, they're unconstitutional. They're not. They have no lawful weight or legal weight, and they're definitely unconstitutional. And the reason is because the peasants aren't allowed to vote. There was a lot of constitutional and legal support for the fact that peasants aren't allowed to vote. It's seriously unconstitutional. That's why they don't have any weight in law. The only time you're allowed to let a peasant vote is when you're going to completely ignore them, or they're going to vote how you want them to, or you're going to pretend they voted one way and then trick them into thinking they voted for the opposite thing. And it's only just occurred to me in like the last week. Voting is actually unconstitutional if you let peasants vote. It's illegal. It can't be allowed. It's not allowed in this country. See, I used to often think about like the idea of letting peasants actually have an actual vote. Which just, anyone who actually thinks that is not fit to rule. That's a fact. That's not an opinion, that's a fact. Because they're so thick, they don't deserve to be listened to about anything. And if you think that they do, then you're obviously not. Your vote doesn't count, which is why you don't get a vote. It's quite fiendish when you think about it. Anyway, so if peasants aren't allowed to vote, the whole concept of tricking people and lying politicians and all that, it all becomes like a very childish thing for like children, doesn't it? And that's what just occurred to me. It's actually unconstitutional to let peasants vote. And the whole setup of voting, letting peasants think they can vote, and I don't even think it was set up that all peasants, it would be like landowners or something. That came up was invented by Hegel. People might say it's the ancient Greeks or something, but there's not really any evidence, and that's a very long time ago. And there's a lot of evidence these ancient Greek civilizations are just a cover, like the Roman Empire, and they said Romans invented roads that went in a straight line. This is all lies. This is all the Royal Society making out as though the Romans were like, for a few hundred years, like literally leading the world in everything. Well, then that doesn't really explain how like the Taj Mahal got built and stuff like that, does it? It doesn't explain how they interacted with the Tamil Empire, the trading empire that preceded them and went all the way through, and possibly even after the Romans. So you're not told about many major things that affect basically everything. And one of the peculiar things is that if you're like a white European, and I mean like a European wherever you happen to live, you might live in America or something, we don't have like an oral tradition that's very strong, and old people are demonised, remember? And there's a big stratification of generations. And if you, for instance, were talking to an old person, people say, why are you talking to them? Because they're simpletons and they've been brainwashed to think that it's strange to talk to someone who wasn't at your year in school. Do you see what I mean? Or someone who you're... A lot of people think like that. They don't even know they're thinking like that. They just find it very unusual to talk to people you don't know, or people who are more than 5 years older than them. They think it's sort of unusual, yeah? Or like, you know, you met them at work, they were your boss, so you have to speak to them. It's almost like you have to have like a built-in excuse to speak to someone who's not the exact same age. And that, for a lot of people, lasts into or through their entire life, you see. But this matter of the constitutional aspect of it comes back in. So if you think, well, what is Gaza, right? Well, I don't know what it is. But England, yeah, is a suzerainty. And it contains the city of London, which isn't part of England. People rightfully correctly say this. But it's governed by English law, yeah? Right? So if English law didn't exist anymore, every single insurance contract would have to be rewritten, wouldn't it? Because it also evolves as English law evolves. And English law, the underpinning for it is the Constitution, right? So you'd have all sorts of massively problematic things happening if English law didn't exist, because all insurance contracts are underwritten by reinsurance, and all of that, the vendor nation, or the vendor shop, let's say, is the City of London. So all of those insurance contracts would have to be rewritten, and that would actually cost trillions and trillions and trillions just to do it, because everything else follows from that. That's the foundation. That's like saying everyone in the whole world has to redig their foundations and put the house back. It's not just digging a foundation and a hole and putting some cement in it with some reinforcement. What you'd be doing is you'd have to rebuild all the houses or take them down and put them up again. It's a huge amount of work. It's actually such a big bit of work. It's actually impossible to do, because it would just be like that world getting hit by an asteroid. Everything would have to be rewritten. You'd be best just writing the whole system off. But when people talk about taking back, or taking, he doesn't say taking back, he says we're going to just take it for ours. And people get shocked at that. But the truth is that England, he's just like a stooge of the British Crown, right? So, you know, when you've got the Royal Institute of International Affairs that operate out of Chatham House in London, and they have the Chatham House rules, so you're allowed to say things they've talked about, but not who said it, you know? So you can have a meeting and say it was decided, but there's 500 people in the meeting. So, frankly, they can just say, well, it's just some crazy person. We let all sorts of views in here. But the point is that the Constitution is an underpinning factor. Now, something recently I've seen, I was looking at something to do with some laws about international covenants, and they were about lawyers, and I didn't really get into it, but right at the top of it, it's a United Nations article, and it's talking about the Commonwealth, but it's not talking about like the British Empire Commonwealth. It's just using the Commonwealth as a kind of categorisation of things within the United Nations, right? So why are they talking about the Commonwealth? They're blurring it all together. And this thing with Trump talking about Gaza, he's not saying he'll invade it for the Israelis or anything. He's just saying we'll just take it. Because clearly their constitution, like the Malaysian constitution, says, right, that if they don't do what we want them to do, we can just take them over. They have never been given independence. They've been given highly subjective conditional independence. Like, you see? And one of the specific aspects of it says that if they don't respect the fact that there's three main races there, which is Indians, read Tamil, because you've got immigrant Indians, but the Tamils were the ones who went there for the British and chopped down all the mosquito mangrove swamps and all that stuff, yeah? They were all Tamils. They weren't from all over India. I don't know which set of Tamils it was, by the way. But anyway, then you had Chinese, but the main one were the Malays. And Malays, culturally quite different, so are Chinese and so are Indians. And what they maliciously did, the British, yeah, is they said that they let the Malays be like the royal family. Right, now this obviously annoyed everybody, because Malaysia did have probably royal families and stuff, but these people, didn't really have any constitutional reason to put them in place. Just like in the Middle East countries, which were all had the constitutions drawn up by England or America, same thing. And Iraq got a new constitution, which was written a long time before Gulf War II, and that talked about, it's so constraining. It's just like a governance document for the country, like a company would have or something. It's very, very detailed. It took a long time to write, and I think they might have had one before the first Gulf War. We definitely put the initial one in, so they've had 2 or 3 at least. But the thing is, the Malaysian one said that the Malays have to be like the governors, so they put in a lot of racist laws. But then they've also said the main reason we'd have to take it back off you is if you're exercising your powers unfairly. And then they put in mandatory racist laws which are completely unfair. And the thing is, as all people who've dealt with Malays know, they're very lazy and they're incredibly corrupt. So even though they can work hard, if you make them work hard, if they've got an option to slack off, they will just slack off, and they all know this, and they will admit it as well, you see. So if you were to like work for a Malay, and then you were to take on a load of Malays, right, they'd want to know what the fuck you were doing, because they know what all Malays are like. The second you start paying them a wage, they'll all just sit back and do absolutely nothing. So the only Malay will only ever give a job to like a friend of the family, their family, or in a kind of swapsy situation. So you give your useless brother a job. Sorry, I'll give you your useless brother a job, and then vice versa. I'll get a family member of yours in place, and you put a family member of yours in place. That's how it works there, you see. So they've maliciously undermined the independence, which isn't independence, yeah? For a country which isn't a country. It's a suzerainty. We're the suzerain. We completely control them. And in Malaysia, bizarrely enough, they all understand this, and they know, like, if they upset an English person, they won't let you know this, but they're all secretly scared, because they know that they could cause not like an international incident, but they could actually if they annoy enough English people, they could end up accidentally annoying the wrong person, and England would use it as an excuse. Do you see what I mean? They're on thin ice, and people don't know about this, but it's the same in all these Middle East countries. They're not proper countries, they're just sort of like zones, extraction zones. That's like why people in Kuwait, like, nobody actually lives in Kuwait. I came across one woman in a mobile phone shop, and she said she actually has never left there. Now, she was a Muslim with a headscarf and stuff on. But I feel quite sorry for her. She's about 20 or something. But the point is that 9 out of 10 Kuwaitis don't even live there. They've got a big house there with a Land Cruiser outside. And they probably have to pay someone to just go round, starting them up and driving them around the corner once a week, because there's no one living in those houses. They're like a ghost town. You can drive past them. They have cars outside. They have big gates. And there's no one in them. You can just tell. You can feel it when you drive past an area like that. You just think there's no one here. Now, fair enough, in the Middle Eastern houses, they're difficult to see what's going on inside. They're designed deliberately because of the heat and stuff like that. But it's really weird, because like one of them told me, he said, look, everything's illegal here. You can't live here. Why would you want to live here? You get pocket money off the government, which is like 3 times the average Western wage. Why on earth would you want to stay here when you're not allowed to do anything, and it's a horrible shithole in the middle of a desert? You know, there's very actually few benefits to living there, but being a citizen is useful. And I think the other thing that Trump said was quite interesting. He says, "Oh no, we'll distribute the Palestinians in like Jordan, Egypt, and probably Syria." But he didn't mention Syria, I don't think. But the point is that none of these countries actually own their country. And all the countries that have accepted Palestinians in the past, I'm not saying this is the Palestinians' fault, I really don't know anything really about Palestinians, but they always end up causing trouble, and all the people in the country hate them, yeah? Now that's probably not them doing anything off their own volition, but that's what always happens. So probably this is another manipulation. But you see, by doing what you saying that minor thing, which seems quite reasonable, I mean, they are just big shithole desert countries, probably nicer than living in Gaza, but they're not particularly nice countries. in the most part. So they're not really that good for living in. But the point is that they don't want the gardens going there. You see what I'm trying to say? And remember, in the past, when people are refugees from lots of countries, instead of going to the next door country, they all want to come to England. So I'm thinking, this is the big problem here. Remember, we've got the Clergy plan going full force at the minute, even though it doesn't exist. Yeah, but it clearly is. They might just say they've got to all come and live in England. Or, now Trump's talking about taking Iceland. Is it Iceland or Greenland? I'm not sure. Maybe he'll say they can all go and live there. Do you see, there's so many bad things that are going to happen, and people are worrying about some alleged bombing in some shithole in the middle of nowhere that really shouldn't have anything to do with us. In fact, but it does, because the same people that rule that part rule us. But we're not meant to know about that, and we're meant to be distracted by things in other countries. Things in other countries which shouldn't have anything to do with us. Because if you believe in countries, then you've already lost anyway. Do you see what I'm trying to say? So anyway, my name's Tom Kyle, and it's the 11th of the 2nd, 2025, and it's a Tuesday. I'd like to know what you think. Thanks very much.